a net thrown over his head, and 3 blows killed the man who took Troy. And the golden face that archaeologists later dug out of the ground to prove he was real had been buried about 3 centuries before he was supposed to have been born. His seat of power was Mycenae, around 1200 BC, on a ridge in the northeast corner of the Peloponnese, in what is now southern Greece. It was a fortress between 2 mountains, walled in blocks so heavy that later Greeks refused to believe men had lifted them and gave the credit to giants. From that ridge it watched the plain below, the road down to the sea, and the traffic that carried tin, ivory, and gold into its workshops. If you wanted to command the Greek world, that ridge was where you did it from. So how does a man who ruled the strongest citadel in Greece end up dead on his own floor, on the first night he is home? To answer that, you have to start before he was born. The family he was born into was already killing itself. His father was Atreus, and Atreus had a brother named Thyestes, and the 2 of them spent a generation trading betrayals over the throne. In the version the Greeks told, Atreus invited his brother to a reconciliation dinner and served him his own children. That is legend, not record. But every Greek in the audience knew it, and it is the reason nobody in this story ever expects a family meal to be safe. Then Atreus was murdered in his own hall by Thyestes' surviving son, a cousin named Aeschylus. Remember that name. He is going to be standing in a doorway at the end of this video. Agamemnon and his younger brother Menelaus ran for their lives out of Mycenae. When they came back, Agamemnon took the throne, and he married a woman named Clytemnestra. You should notice what has already happened here. Before he has fought a single battle, Agamemnon has inherited an enemy, and he has married a wife whose loyalty was never really his. Would you have felt safe on that throne? The world he ruled was real, and we can measure it. In 1952, a young English architect named Michael Ventris cracked a script called Linear B, scratched into clay tablets at Mycenae, at Pylos, at Knossos. Those tablets are not poetry. They are inventories: sheep, bronze, chariot wheels, perfumed oil, rowers assigned to ships, women counted by the workshop, and at the top of that system sits a title: the Wanax, the great king who owned the storerooms and the scribes. That is the kind of power the poems are remembering. A palace that counted everything. Homer gives him one number above all others. In the second book of the Iliad, the poet lists every contingent sailing for Troy, and Agamemnon brings 100 ships of his own, more than any other king in the fleet, and he lends 60 more to the Arcadians who have no ships at all. The whole armada, as Homer counts it, is 1,186 vessels. Nobody thinks that number is an inventory. It is a poet telling you the scale of the man who commanded it, but the fleet did not move. It gathered at Aulis, on the strait between Boeotia and the island of Euboea, and the wind sat wrong, day after day, and thousands of armed men waited on a beach with nothing to do but eat their own supplies. So the story turns on a question a king should never have to answer. What would you spend to get a wind? Agamemnon spent his daughter. Later poets say he called the girl Iphigenia to Aulis with a lie about a wedding to Achilles, and cut her throat on an altar for the goddess Artemis, and the wind came. Hold on to one detail there, because it changes everything about how you read the rest. That sacrifice is not in Homer at all. It comes from the later tradition, from the lost epic called the Cypria, from Aeschylus, from Euripides. The Greeks added it, and once you add it, the murder at the end of his life stops being a betrayal and starts being a bill. At Troy, he made his second unforgettable mistake, and this one Homer tells in full. The Iliad opens on it. Agamemnon has taken a woman named Chryseis as a prize, and her father is a priest of Apollo. And when the king sends the old man away insulted, plague goes through the Greek camp for 9 days. Forced to give the girl back, Agamemnon takes a replacement out of the tent of Achilles, the best fighter in the army, in front of everyone. Not because he needs her, because he cannot be seen to lose. Achilles walks off the battlefield, and the war stops working. In the 9th book, with the Trojans pressing, Agamemnon sends an embassy to buy him back, and the offer is one of the most specific lists in ancient literature. 7 tripods never touched by fire, 10 talents of gold, 20 cauldrons, 12 prize-winning horses, 7 skilled women from Lesbos, and one of his own daughters in marriage with 7 cities as her dowry. Achilles says no. Ask yourself why. Because the offer restores the property and never once says the word sorry, and both men know it. So the Trojans come across the ditch, and they reach the ships, and they put fire on them. That is how close the strongest army in Greece comes to losing everything because one king could not back down. And then Homer does something strange. He makes Agamemnon magnificent. In the 11th book, the king goes out in front of the line and cuts his way through the Trojan army. Homer names the men he kills and describes him hacking a man's arms off and his head and sending the trunk rolling away through the crowd like a log. A Trojan named Coon, defending his brother's body, drives a spear straight through Agamemnon's forearm. He kills Coon anyway. He keeps fighting with the shaft through his arm. He drives the whole Trojan line back to the gates of the city, and he only leaves the field when the blood in the wound starts to dry and the pain arrives. That is the same man who could not apologize. Homer refuses to let you have a simple opinion about him, and that is exactly why the character is still alive 3,000 years later. Troy fell. After 10 years, the city burned, and Agamemnon loaded his ships for home, and among the plunder he took Cassandra, a daughter of the Trojan king, who in the tradition can see what is coming and is never believed. Picture that ship, the winner, sailing home with a prophet on board who already knows the ending, because at the other end of that voyage, his own house had been waiting for years, and it had been counting. Homer tells this part twice, in the 4th book of the Odyssey and again in the 11th, and the detail is chilling in how organized it is. Aeschylus, the cousin, had spent that decade in the palace with Clytemnestra. He posted a lookout on the coast for a full year and paid the man 2 talents of gold to watch for one sail. When the sail came, he did not raise an army. He prepared a feast, welcomed the king home, and hid 20 armed men in the hall. In Homer's version, Agamemnon is cut down over dinner, and the ghost of him tells Odysseus in the underworld that he was killed like an ox at the manger. Then, in 458 BC, the playwright Aeschylus rewrote the murder, and his version is the one the world remembers. He gives the killing to Clytemnestra. She meets her husband at the door, rolls out crimson cloth for him to walk on, waits until he is unarmed in his bath, throws a robe over him so his arms are trapped inside the cloth, and strikes him 3 times. And she does not apologize either. She stands over the body and names her daughter. So which one is true? Neither, in the way you mean. What you are watching is a story changing owners. Homer's murder is a coup by a rival man, and Aeschylus turns it into a mother collecting a debt from Aulis. 200 years apart, the Greeks decided the more terrible version was the more honest one. Which leaves the last question. Was there ever a man? In 1876, Heinrich Schliemann dug inside the walls of Mycenae, found a circle of shaft graves packed with gold, and lifted a hammered gold death mask off a face. He announced he had looked upon the face of Agamemnon. He had not. The mask belongs to about 1500 BC, roughly 3 centuries too early for a war traditionally set around 1200, and it has never stopped being argued about since. The American classicist William Calder III has claimed the mask was tampered with to look more heroic, which most specialists reject, and the dispute alone tells you how badly people wanted that face to be his. The tablets Ventris read do not name him either, not one Agamemnon in the whole archive. But something is out there. In the Hittite state archives from central Anatolia, the ones the historian Trevor Bryce has spent a career working through, there is a foreign power across the sea called Ahiawa, close to the Greek word Achaeans, and there is a city under Hittite protection called Wilusa, which is close to Ilias, which is Troy. In a letter written around 1250 BC, a Hittite emperor addresses the king of Ahiawa as my brother, an equal, a great king. Somebody on the Greek side was powerful enough to be written to like that, and the city itself is real. Manfred Korfmann's excavations at Hisarlik in northwest Turkey uncovered a lower town and a defensive ditch far beyond the citadel Schliemann had dug, a settlement many times larger than anyone assumed, sitting exactly where a trading power should sit, with destruction layers to match. Then the whole world that produced him burned. Around 1200 BC, Mycenae itself was destroyed, along with palace after palace across Greece, and the scribes stopped writing, and Linear B was not read again for 3,000 years. The kings vanished. The counting stopped. What came through the dark was a song. And so the only proof we have of the strongest king in Greece is that people would not stop telling the story of how he died at home.